Marv hasn't worked, how was it, 18 years ago, 15 years ago? We closed,
24.
How many?
24.
24 years, he hasn't worked 20. Now that's a story. For 24 years, did he work? It's not like he was the luckiest businessman in the world. He was an electrical engineer. He was able to go on Long Island. In the 60s, we were the capital of aeronautics. Roosevelt Field was where the first planes went off. He was able to start with Republic, and he was electric. He moved up. Then he was able to transfer and get a job with 20 guys working at Republic. Then he got a job with 30 guys working at Grumming. Then he went to the next place. His trajectory was up. And when it came to the end, the US government decided they didn't want to sponsor a space program. They started letting people go. And he'd come home to Arlene and say, I had to fire 4 guys. The next day, 4 guys. Until he was the last one there, he left. So he wasn't lucky with that. But he was one of the smartest people I knew. I'm never too bright when it came to the stock market. Bob he didn't want to cut and pay brokers and pay this and that. He took all of the tests so he could trade his own stocks. And he accumulated all of the money because they were living in Rockaway. Well, my brother Irving, my grandma, whatever, my aunt. And he was going to buy the best house in Oceanside because Marlene and Lenny, they were able to buy. But the stock market crashed. And that's it. So he was without a job, without money, without anything. My brother Irv came up with an idea. He said, Lee Miles. So being at the beach, they had to move up to Middletown, where the only time it didn't snow was in July. It was the worst hellhole. But every day, Aldi was there. And they had Lee Miles, and he had to tell a guy, this car of yours needs a new transmission. Sometimes it didn't really need a whole transmission, but his job was to sell it. And he found a guy that liked to drink, who was the installer, and he had to rebuild it. Marv, of course, never knew anything about Lee Miles, but he had to learn. And a short time later, he opened a second location, and my brother Irv kept saying, do it, let's open a lot of stores, whatever. The problem was, whenever he needed one of his guys, he had to go to jail because he had to bail him out. The guys were always in jail. Needless to say, the places ended up, Irv said, you know what, we're losing too much money, let's sell it. So there they are, up in the snow capital of the world, in Middletown. And they said, what are we gonna do? We have no money, we have no place to live, and all relatives had houses. Their house was not the most expensive house in the world, but everybody else was close, whatever. I was able to be lucky enough. I was in children's clothing business, and one of the salesmen, I said, can you do something for my brother? And he said, well, I know a store for sale in Elmsford, New York, a place I never heard of. And it was probably the shittiest store in the world, but they were able to buy it. And they would drive for hours, and the roads with snow and ice coming from Middletown down to there. And then they'd find people, and whatever the price was, the people would say, it's a little bit, because that area was not a well-to-do area. Elmsford, New York, it's close to where there's a jail. So it was a terrible, terrible thing. My brother Irv and I happened to start Bellini furniture stores, and we did very well. And Arlene said, what can we do? So we opened the store in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and they were doing fantastic. The store was fantastic. And Mom said, you know what? Mike and Nancy, they're in Arizona. We're going to move everybody. And Arlene said, let's do it. So, as Douglas just said, he went out with a van. They stayed by my house the last day coming down from Elmsford. There was a stop along the way. They didn't have to pay for a hotel room. They stayed by me for one night. And Doug was a young guy in those days. He had just graduated high school. And after that, they made the big pilgrimage out to Arizona. He thought the streets were going to be lined with gold because in Fort Lee, New Jersey, we had a bunch of stores by that time, and he thought everybody would come for Bellini furniture. Needless to say, nobody came. And what Marv would do, and Arlene, his wonderful wife, would do, instead of going to the best restaurant in town, every bar knew them. The reason they knew them, they weren't big drinkers. It was a special word, happy hour. And they would feast on chips, on whatever, hot dog or something, and that's how they lived. So they didn't spend a lot of money. And rather than Marv having to have a full-time guy to make deliveries, he had a van, and he would take an armoire that maybe, I don't know, 130 pounds, he would push it on top of the van to make a delivery. And then when he would get there, Oli would tell me the person saw a scratch. He'd have to take it back on top of the van. It wasn't easy for them. And then when times were good, times were bad. Anyway, he finally got very lucky. There was something called the American government. And the American government said to everybody, we have money. So there was this guy who came along who wasn't too bright, and he gave Marv a tremendous sum of money, which Marv never thought he would ever get, to buy the store. And Marv was waiting. I would like to teach you about the store. I'd like to do. Of course, the guy never came. The guy opened and closed in a very short period of time, but it was no problem because the U.S. government small business loan took care of it. With this money, 24 years ago, Marv and Arlene lived. And with that, he was able to provide for his son's education, for his grandchildren. He took pennies and made it into dollars. He took care of everybody. The reason he took care of everybody is the family came first. And he's the last 24, and the reason he didn't reopen it, so why don't you reopen another store and sell it to somebody else? Arlene said, I want Marv with me. So for the last 24 years, well, for the 62 years, they were always together. Arlene went through the snow, she went through this, through that. They never had, but their children always had, and their grandchildren. Even to this day, they set up funds for the grandchildren. They didn't have for themselves, but they took care of the grandchildren. And basically, I didn't write down that. I don't remember anything else. And he said his bathing suit is going to have a great wave.